What a pleasure it is to be in Park Ridge this blustery March afternoon to produce yet another in the expanding series of the living history recollections concerning our specialty. But stay tuned. You're about to hear the story of possibly the key individual in a compilation of the dissemination of the history of this specialty we call anesthesiology. We're obviously talking about Patrick Sim, the Wood Library Museum's and the ASA's longest tenured employee, who began this venture on February the 16th, 1971, now beginning his 34th year. This means that he served with Jack Andes, Glenn Johnson, Bill Marinko, and now Ron Bruns. Patrick, let's turn now to what's made you, who came here with no knowledge about anesthesiology, to what has now established you as the premier purveyor of the history of the knowledge base of our specialty. And I mean add recognition, and I might add recognized worldwide. Now let's set the stage for what it was like before and when you arrived. Bussey Highway was the place where the ASA had chosen to move in 1963, and they had one exhibit by Richard Gill on curare, and a couple of sets of shelves for quote-unquote rare books, and a few unique items, but as you know, not much depth. And the basement was full of what we might call stuff, and I think that it's been called by others, and I think we were calling it then too, chaos. An expanding ASA that wanted and needed the space that had been built for the Wood Library Museum was encroaching upon us. Before you got here, Walter Necker and his associate Kathy Litchard were hired to put the library together and fired for an indiscretion before much could be accomplished. And then following that, Al Betcher, looking for someone who might change directions here, hired a young man named Martin Levine. He was a new management type, and Betcher thought that he could sell the idea of a library museum both to the ASA and its membership. But he soon saw that he had little to sell and knew nothing about how to organize a library or a museum. One day in January 1971, he called me saying that he had a lead about a young man who was a new graduate from a library science program that could possibly be hired for a minimum wage. So began a relationship with Patrick Sim, the single most significant move since Paul Wood conceived the idea of a library museum for our specialty. So who is Patrick Sim? Patrick, where were you born?
Dr. Tandy, first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to sit with you, my first boss, to chat with you and reminisce what has happened in the last more than 3 decades of my service to the ASA. And indeed, you have articulated more than I deserve in terms of my service to you. And you know, and everybody else knows that the Wood Library Museum was built not just with the service of Patrick Sim. It was the board, and in particular you, who was the spearhead of leadership that makes it what it is today. And to answer the question of my roots, I was born and raised in Hong Kong and then was a British colony in South China, part of the province of Guangdong. I am a 3rd generation Hong Kong native. Before I came to this country, the furthest I have ever traveled was the adjacent Portuguese colony called Macau. And so I spent a good 23, 24 years of my life in the British Crown colony of Hong Kong.
Well, you were ripe at the time of your birth to have been involved in World War II. Do you have any recollection of any of that from a personal standpoint? What happened to you?
Actually, I was old enough and yet too young to comprehend, more to apprehend and comprehend the atrocity of war. I remember that only when I was, perhaps a few years old, I don't even know how old I was, and that my aunt brought me and my younger sister, who was about 3 years younger than I, fled Hong Kong to by ship to our native town in southeast China. And the reason that my father and my mother were not accompanying us was because there was, we were on the last on the boat to the boat that brought us back to China. And I remember my father was with very misty eye recalling this, saying that, well, just to see you tagging along with your aunt and your sister was in your aunt's arms was really was a very, very sad thing. But then it was through the war years that we were staying in my maternal grandmother's home during the war, and I did not see the real atrocity, but I did have a great fear of war, because you don't know what would happen next. As a young child, you didn't know what would happen. But after the war years, we returned to Hong Kong, and at the time my younger brother Dominic was born, and that's how we reunited. I think it was 1946 or 47.
Patrick, what was your primary language?
I am a Cantonese, that is the Chap Sui people from South China. Actually, our dialect was not even Cantonese. The Chinese language is a very, the Chinese language is written uniformly in every tongue of the Chinese nationals, but it's spoken, probably there are more than 440 dialects of the same language. So mine is a southern dialect, which is typical east of the Guangdong province. If I may relate the geographical equivalence, it would be just like Florida and the South Caribbeans. And we were speaking a dialect that is not Cantonese. And to this day, my mother is still not a fluent Cantonese-speaking person. Is sticking to our own dialects. But of course, growing up in Hong Kong, it's Cantonese.
Well, the usual question is, in what language do you dream?
It's all in Chinese, of course, in Cantonese. Yes. And interestingly, when I am speaking to you, my mind frame is in English. But if you put me in a Chinese situation and asking me to translate or to speak spontaneously in the English language is pretty difficult.
Yeah, that's interesting. Patrick, in retrospect, who were the people, say, a few people that influenced your life early on? In retrospect, what do you think would it have been family, would it have been teachers, would it have been, tell us about the folks that influenced you.
I think I have to think of my late father, a very entrepreneurial businessman who didn't even go to college. And he was a role model. He just passed away 2 years ago. I think his kindness and also his thoughtfulness to the family really touched me very much. And he was not only a model, also a very good advisor to tell me what to do and what not to do, but he would never force on me to say you should do this and do that. Let me give you an example. In my generation of Chinese immigrants, Chinese natives in Hong Kong, everybody wants to study medicine. Everybody wanted to be a doctor, to be an engineer, to be a scientist. But when I said that, I wanted to study history. Not only that he did not object to it, he encouraged me to do that. And he, as I said, did not have a college degree, but he said, son, although I don't have a college degree, I am a graduate of society. I have a PhD in society. That's my father. I miss him very much. Yeah. He was the greatest influence in my life.
Well, I hope by now that you've seen the picture that on the screen of your mother and father and you as the youngest child. It's a wonderful picture. Tell us about your education and maybe the jobs that you had along the way. Let's talk about before you came to the States.
Well, I am a typical product of colonial education, hybrid, so to speak. You are never good at anything, but you are something of something. I had 6 years of primary education, which is basically Chinese, and only when we were at the 3rd grade that we begin to study English. But then by the time I finished 6th grade, I went to a what they call Anglo-Chinese school, which was run by the Jesuit, the Catholic missionary. It's the LaSalle brothers, the Christian brothers. If you equate it as in today's situation, it's those in Napa Valley making brandy, the Christian brothers. They were the longest established educational organization in Hong Kong. I spent the rest of my high school years at St. Joseph's College. College means just like collegium in the British sense. It's only high school. After high school, I spent of course, Hong Kong at the time when I was growing up was a colonial society, only having one university to accommodate all young graduates, and those who could not make it to the university would have to either go to work, preferably government service, or you think of something else, going abroad or going to vocational colleges, and one of these vocational colleges is teacher training. I went to teacher training college, and government-run teacher training college, which has 2 years of instruction and 2 years of practical teaching, and I finished teaching education as well as completing my obligation there before I left for the United States.
What encouraged you to come to the United States?
Well,
what were the circumstances?
I think that as part of it is my quest for intellectual stimulation. Intellectual is pretty lofty word, which probably is more of curiosity to learn than anything else. Being a teacher, I love it. I love my 2 years of teaching in Hong Kong. I was teaching in junior high level up to what we call 8th or 9th grade. But then at that time, is a government institution, government school, and I had a very happy career and a very good salary, and I could have settled down. But at that time, my very good friend, whom I considered even more than a brother, Paul Yu, he had been a classmate and a very good friend since we were in grade schools. He left for Kirksville at the Northeast Missouri State Teachers College. And at the time it was so inexpensive, he said, well, Patrick, why don't you think of it? And after 2 years teaching obligation, I started to apply for Northeast Missouri State Teachers College, and I got accepted. But there's a problem. Under the British system, college or university degree comes in 3 years. Here in the United States, it is a 4-year program. So when I went to the education department to apply for a study leave, they said, you crazy? First of all, you go to the United States and you get a degree that it's not going to help you in your career advance because we are in a different system, number one. Number two, what is the purpose of going there for 4 years and for 3 years and you can't finish your degree? We only give you 3 years leave of absence. I said, well, then I would think of the way to speed up my program. And said, are you sure? And you're coming back, you are still doing the same thing as you have never been having any further education. I said, okay, fine. By the way, how much are you going to spend there? It was $800, room and board and tuition. And said, well, even just go there for fun, just to go to the United States to see the world is worth it. So that was rather a prophetic thing that only 18 years later that I went back to Hong Kong to see my family again.
18 years later.
Yes.
Well, I understand you met a young lady in Kirksville.
Yes.
Tell me the circumstances about that.
Well, this is a very sweet lady and a lifetime partner. I met Shumei when actually after I have studied in Kirksville for a full year, and then it was just after Labor Day, we work hard in summer to supplement our expenses for the year by working in summer. And then when I went back to school the second year, I was at the Foreign Students Advisor's office to get papers ready, and then I saw this girl from Taiwan, and who was, it's more of her characteristic attitude that attracted me, and we began to get acquainted, and then we became very good friends. And actually we married the last year before I graduated. And for a year I was commuting between school and until she got her master's degree. So in other words, it's an undergraduate dating a graduate student.
Yeah. Well, how long was it after that that your boys were born?
Actually, as my father had warned me, saying that you go to liberal arts education, it's hard to get a living. As I would advise to my children the same thing. I wasn't too sure what I would do after getting my degree in history, a bachelor's degree in history, and before I decided to go to library science, I wasn't too sure what I was going to do. So, but then at the time we were in Chicago since graduation, trying to work in order to save money for something else before I applied for library school in Albany, New York. So Gabriel was born while we were in Albany, at the State University of New York in Albany. That was in the summer of 1970. A year before I joined the ASA.
Well, how in the world did you hear about this job that Martin Levine was obviously looking for someone to help him?
Well, that's I think there's always a purpose in what we're doing. Actually, before I came to Chicago, the reason I came from Chicago was that my older sister, actually my younger sister, the sister who was next to me in a string of brothers and sisters of 7. Teresa was in Chicago. Bob and Teresa, my brother-in-law Bob, and they were in Chicago. Bob was a chemist working for a local paint company. And after graduation from Albany, New York, I actually tried to try to find a job in the New York area. I was not successful, and so. After I graduated, after the fall semester, in other words, in 3 semesters, I got my master's degree. Teresa said, "Why don't you come to Chicago and maybe you could find something?" At the time, I was working only part-time at New York State Medical Library. That was my first mentor.
Where is that?
She is Marcia Davidoff. I think she's retired. She's a neighbor of Dr. Caton, believe it or not. So things seems to work out in a very convenient way. Yeah. Marcia was a medical librarian. I think she's now retired. And we've been in touch since day one. And as I was looking for a job, not successful on the East Coast, Marcia said, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to Chicago, where I work in summer, to stay with my sister to see other opportunities there." And at the same time, while I was in library school, I took courses in medical librarianship, and more or less is a bona fide medical librarian. And my Professor Valancourt, was very helpful in telling me about the medical library field. And Marcia, of course, was a medical librarian too. He said, "Well, Patrick, I have a very good friend who happens to be the director of the Medical Library Association in Chicago, Mrs. Helen Schmidt Brown. Why don't you go there and tell her you know me, and then you're looking for a job?" So the first thing, I moved to Chicago in February. It was very cold. I gave a call to Mrs. Brown. I said, "Mrs. Brown, Marcia Davidoff, give me this connection. I wonder if you have any openings in your placement file. I'm a member of the Medical Library Association." And he looked at it. She looked at it, and then she said, "Yes, of course." This is all on a phone conversation. I have a position, librarian's position in Park Ridge, Illinois. It's called American Society of Anesthesiologists. They were looking for a librarian, and then she read all along. I remember part of the job description was be innovative, to develop teaching materials, all of these things. And for a person like myself, a new graduate without knowing anything, and I always kid my friends, and I couldn't even pronounce the word anesthesiology without twisting my tongue. So that's how I started, and then of course Mrs. Brown gave me the phone number 825-5586. I called. Mr. Martin Levine invited me for an interview, and at the time I had to borrow my brother-in-law's Volkswagen, and we drove to Park Ridge. I thought it was a short interview, but Martin Levine kept me for at least 2 hours, while poor Shumei was sitting in the Volkswagen, probably freezing. Oh my and for that, and I think it was before February 16th. And then he said, well, why don't you come tomorrow? I said, okay. And then when I got home, I got a call. Martin's secretary said, well, we're closed on Monday. That was February 15th. It was Washington's birthday. We were closed. So I started on the 16th of February. And that began a relationship with the ASA and with you, Dr. Tandy, for the last 34 years.
Well, in retrospect, once you got here, what did the challenge appear to be? Did it look overwhelming, or on the other hand, was it a day-to-day sort of thing, or what did it look like to you?
To say overwhelming is an understatement. I didn't even know that I had a job, and Mr. Levine just told me what to do, and not with specific assignments, but you know, he confided in me that he knew nothing about libraries, and and he said, well, practically there wasn't anything specific, but there's everything that I had to do. He told me that I'm on the faculty of Northwestern University, and I'm not around all the time, and I play tennis a lot. I remember that. So in other words, I had a free hand to do anything I wanted. And first of all, of course, it was the basement with all the equipment, everything. I began to do something with it, and later on, he was kind enough to to hire a high school student to help me get organized in the basement, and also I began to work on the books, begin to do the cataloging. It was the first learning experience to do something you learn from library school, but had no practical experience, and now you can incorporate what you have been learning. It took quite a while to get set, and the first time I met the board was when Mr. Lansdale was with you folks to reorganize the Woodlife Museum.
Right. Well, that was a big learning curve going on for the Wood Library Museum at the time, and with the ASA too. And that's another story. But Patrick, how do you explain your remarkable transformation from a young, inexperienced librarian to your obvious accomplishments at this point in time?
Your description make me blush. I think it is basically opportunity and being the right person at the right place. I think if there is any asset about myself, it's my personality, a product of colonial Hong Kong, and also from my family that is very caring and very much a lot of good advice that I do it, and I think it's all the combination of all these things, and I always have a feeling that I have to work and perform better in order to do a job. Frankly speaking, is to survive.
Well, let's talk a little bit about once you saw the challenge. Who were some of the people that challenged you or that made a difference in what happened as the years passed by? Let's talk about that.
Actually, there's not much challenge other than encouragement. The first one I'll say is you. I think you are a leader, a boss who would pick up the phone and would tell you, you do this, you do that, how about this and that, and you just give me a free hand, and being that way actually is a very much a motivation to get things done. And when it was Dr. Garth Houston, it was an entirely another intellectual development that I learned a lot from him in ways of beginning to like anesthesia history, learn more about it, and the discipline to do it. And then Dr. Elliot Miller, of course, he was a slave driver, as a taskmaster. He would give you multiple assignments, and then you would just have to juggle to see how you would accomplish. I know that up to this point, I still have some unfinished tasks that I need to do.
We'll talk about those later. What have been the best decisions you've made, both in and out of your career? Just think about what have been positive decisions, or maybe even if you think of negative ones, but I don't see many negatives in your life, Patrick.
Well, my life is rather simple. I don't really have to worry about making a decision that would make such a huge dramatic difference in my life. I thought even being employed by the ASA was happenstance. I was probably if that answers your question, the decision is come to Chicago, and the rest of it is a career that I enjoy, the career that is constantly and continually a learning process. I don't see there's any challenge to me, because working for the Woodlife Museum is basically working at the direction of the Board of Trustees and under the guidance of the Executive Office of the ASA, which is always a pleasure, especially when you've been here long enough. You begin to be respected as an expert of tradition. They turn to you, either you know it or not. I think that's a very positive.
Well, but the amazing thing really has been that you were given a job, you made it into a career, and you did it in a way that all of us sit back and we're just proud to have been there, to have known you. But before we get there to where we are today, by 1992 we were ready to move to a new building, because in the old building, as you well remember, the ASA was a growing organization. They had built an addition onto their building that had been built in the 60s mainly to house the Wood Library. Then as they began to grow, they obviously needed more space. And they then began to take over space. They took our exhibit space. They then began to move into the offices and that sort of thing. And so it was obvious to everybody that we needed more space. So by 1992, there was a major plan to build this building. So as that plan evolved, think back about your involvement in that, what you projecting as the needs of this organization. How has that worked out? Has it been, what'd you forget? What did you not include, or has it all worked out perfectly?
I think given the circumstances, we have the Woodlife Museum have gained more than it's asked for. But again, in hindsight, library collections, especially museum collections, grow exponentially. We will end up with having not enough space, perhaps in the next 2 decades. But at the time, I think we have to, as a historian, a librarian, historian, we have to give credit to Dr. Ed Ernst for the first long-range planning report. That was the blueprint of what we needed when we moved to this place. And of course, Dr. Miller was a master of good relationship with the leadership of the ASA. He was one of those planners of the new building, and he took all what we have suggested to, including Dr. Bauser's suggestion for the museum, for the rare book room. For instance, the rare book room actually was doubly fortified in terms of flooring in order to accommodate a moving tracks for moving shelves when it becomes necessary. And as much as we have asked, actually the space was all the ASA have given us. Dr. Bird and Glenn Johnson truly had the Woodlife Museum in mind when the building was built.
Mm-hmm. So it's worked out pretty well, actually. Let's talk about some, you're sitting in this position as not only here, but as the meetings are held around the country and as people traverse the world and land in Chicago, you've run into some interesting people along the way. Yes. Tell me about a few of those people that might have you'd been surprised about meeting, or that added to you, or that were different.
Well, first of all, the anesthesiologists have been amazingly good to me, and all of if I think about those people who has impacted on my career, and become very dear to me, they are all anesthesiologists. Number one is you, and not because we are here, but it truly is the greatest pleasure and the largest fortune I have is to have you as my first boss and my mentor and my good friend for this long. And actually, you probably do not realize a lot of the traits, a lot of the interest that I had is from you. It's something like what I have learned from my father. It's not directly instructional or didactic. It was through example, through conversation, and although we are not that far apart in terms of our age, you are the number one. And then I would think of a few others. This is a hard question in a way, because there's so many of them. I would miss those I should mention, but it doesn't mean even to mention a few in the orders, not of any preferences, but they are all equally important to me. Number one, I should not number them, but you, and the next one I will recall is Dr. Ray Fink, the late Dr. B. Raymond Fink, was such a kindly, scholarly, thoughtful individual that I value and cherish to be my teacher, good friend, mentor, and he also taught me, again, not through instruction, but through examples. I just love his correspondence, his writings. Taught me how to enjoy and learn to express the English language in a good way. And then, of course, there's another one who is still with us, as Dr. C. Ron Stephen, the Canadian turned American. Interestingly, his kindliness is also very much appreciated. He and Mrs. Stephen is always very dear to me. Happened to be almost the same age as my father, and we have good conversations every single time, and we talk on the phone, and is always thinking of my father. And of course, there was the Rod Calverley. Dr. Calverley really brought me into history and gave me the confidence to express myself in writing papers and involved in the History Association and in the history of anesthesia. And of course, the late Garth Houston, as you know him, you introduced Dr. Garth Houston to the WLM and more or less designated him the leader after you. Dr. Houston was another kindly, wonderful intellectual that I enjoy most.
Any others that have come through that have just been perchance serendipitous encounters?
There are probably a lot of them that I could not recall, but you know, another person is just like Dr. Alan Sessler. His humanity and his easiness. Really, I've been working with him since he joined the board in charge of the Living History, this series that while we're talking here. Is a great individual, is a great leader, a great person that you appreciate. And the other person is Dr. John Leahy. Dr. John Leahy is probably a lot of people do not know Dr. Leahy, but he is also an inspiration. But I just can't think of anyone else, probably a lot more, that has greatly impacted my career or anything that I've done in a positive way.
Well, let's look back over 34 years, and if you had it to do again, or is there anything that you'd do differently?
I would not. I think ASA has been very kind and very thoughtful, very generous to Patrick Sim and his family. I don't think that I would have it done differently, considering my disposition, my personality, and my training. I think this is the best. Is the best I would ever ask of myself, and it's only getting better. Frankly, when I started with this institution, I thought, gee, I was trained as a librarian. I wanted to be a college librarian. I wanted to be in a much more growing situation. Why would I end up with being a medical specialty librarian, being insulated and separated from the rest of the library world? But it's a blessing in disguise. It helped me develop myself in a way that if you say, okay, Patrick, I want to offer a course in anesthesiology librarianship. I want you to be in charge. I think I could be comfortably step in and do a good job.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have no doubt about that. Well, let's talk about, do you have any admonitions for the future? What's your vision for the WLM once we're all gone and others will be in your spot and my spot? What have you thought about that?
I think so, especially when you are getting at this point in my life. We lay people, as opposed to physicians, we're always very sensitive about, you know, how long you're going to be here, or the mortality of life, or the immortality of life. I think my years association with doctors teaches me, you know, how to move on in life and look at the larger picture beyond where your contribution goes. As much as look at the Wood Library Museum, I think it is a wonderful institution. Only anesthesiologists have made it possible. The support is unique. I can't say that about other medical specialties because I have no experience in that, but the way I've been here with the anesthesiologists, I know that you started with a Dr. Paul Meyer Wood and with a personal collection, and then it's developed into an institution, and it grows. The evolution of the institution will be getting even better as we now are in the 21st century. My role, if we both look back how the WLM started with Dr. Wood being librarian curator until, and then next to is Walter Necker, followed by Martin Levine, and then myself. There is always a role for us being there. And for a Patrick Sim, who is such an ordinary person, perhaps the only asset is that he works hard, he is conscientious what he's doing. I just happened to be at the time that the Wood Library Museum would benefit from my service, my ability most. And you know, organization, building, and of course the trustee is always the backbone, the leadership that makes what's happening. But as far as my own perspective goes as a librarian, I think I was at the right time, at the right place to develop and help the WLM to what it is. And perhaps in the 21st century, my vision, if there's a vision, if you will, for a librarian like myself, is that it will move up one notch higher to have it organized, to take advantage of the electronic age, to let it belong to the rest of the world with a push of a few buttons, and then we can tell the world what we have and how organized we are, what we can contribute. I think that's a vision that I would see the next generation of leadership in management of this institution should go.
Well, all who know and know that you were the right person at the right time, and there's been an enormous amount accomplished at this point in time. But what's yet to be accomplished on your agenda, both personal and corporate, long and short term? What do you still want to try to do?
As I was in solo practice from 1971 until 1980. And then we have another staff member, Assistant Librarian Sarah Graham, for 8 years. And then we have Karen Biederman, who has since been with us. And then we have an archivist. I think the Woodlife Museum is in good position to make progress with the resources that we have, with the great support, the ASA, almost unconditional support by the leadership of the trustees. I think my own overriding desire is to finish a project which started from the late Garth Houston, and then always probed and almost stimulated by my former chairman Charles Stanley, as well as former chairman Elliot Miller, to finish an annotated bibliography, which I call it the heritage of anesthesia, trying to tell the story of anesthesia according to since antiquity, according to the rare book collection that we have. And it was a larger job than I thought. When my initial scheme, which was approved by Dr. Houston, was that it would be a great project to produce a huge annotated bibliography, and I was thinking of dedicating this book to my three chairmen, Charles Stanley, Garth Houston, and Elliot Miller. But the book is still, hopefully it will be done at least at the twilight of my career, which I hope I will be able to finish it.
Well, this is not quite the twilight of your career. As far as I'm concerned, we're standing on the pinnacle, and it seems to be plateauing at that pinnacle. So there's still time to do that, and that is anticipated. And I think the entire world of anesthesia and medical history will benefit from that. So we're looking forward to it. What about other things?
I can't think of any other thing else.
Well, let me just spend a minute talking about what other people have said about Patrick Sim. And it's been fun talking to you about what you say about Patrick Sim, but there are some other ideas out there too. And this comes from a fellow that you reported to every day here for many years. Says, and I'll just read excerpts from it. It says, he and Shumei raised two respectful Christian sons, one a successful dentist and the second a talented musician. He was employed at the WLM on 2/16/71. Now he has 33 plus years of dedicated service to the WLM. Most of those years, he reported to me, as an ASA employee, and I always considered him a model employee. Pat's work ethic and his desire to do the right thing caused other ASA employees to admire him professionally and personally. He has the type of personality to report to the ASA as an employee and yet respond to the WLM Board of Trustees for his work responsibilities. For some people, that would have been an impossible conflict, but not for Pat. Pat was an excellent goodwill ambassador for the ASA and the WLM. When visitors come to this building, Pat has the knack of making that visitor feel like he was the most important person in the world. His knowledge of anesthesia history draws ASA members and others to Pat, and they enjoy his conversational expertise on the history of anesthesia. I've seen Pat at ASA bookstores at their annual meeting, conversing first with just a regular member that he doesn't know, or otherwise with a past president, or with some renowned pioneer in anesthesia. And they all seem to flock around him and immensely enjoy the discussions with Pat. And then he goes into this business about the fact that that you're reacting with the staff, with the ASA staff, sometimes at those meetings, and then goes into details about your winning in ping pong, and then also when I think that was in St. Louis, and then a pool game in New Orleans, and you claiming you'd never played pool before. And his comment was that obviously Patrick Sim is a winner in whatever he does. He says, I've heard many people say that the WLM is a jewel in the ASA's crown. And my comment always to this statement has been that Patrick Sim is the jewel in WLM's crown. Another observation, Pat is great to work with. I consider him my mentor, my colleague, and my friend. He has a wonderful work ethic, and as you know, is well respected by physicians, historians, colleagues, and fellow librarians from all over the world. Of all the bosses that I've had in my life, I admire Patrick the most. It's great to work with and for him. Now you're one of 7, and it's been my pleasure to talk to most of your siblings. I'm just going to read some comments from some of them. My assessment on my brother is quite objective. We're very close, and he's my hero. Patrick's a very cautious person, more humble than necessary. That's because he always wants to do an excellent job of things he knows that he can deliver. He's never flashy, but totally reliable. For over 4 generations, and his dedication and loyalty to his job and his family, and talks about that spanning now over 4 generations to his friends, is truly remarkable for me to observe. Patrick's a historian at heart. Besides his contribution to anesthesia, he's also our family historian. He has every detail and all sources of the Sim family historic background and events gathered and compiled. The brainiest of the family? Perhaps not, but he's always been the one who gets the greatest respect from all the other siblings. We all trust him. We're all proud of his achievements and regard him as the hero who carries our family spirit, our principle, our standard. He's our champion. So here's another one. Patrick is the sage of our family. He's conservative. He's a philosopher of the family. He's dedicated. He's sentimental. Always would take his little sister out. He's our father goose. He's protective. He's caring. He's loving. He's self-sacrificing. The comment is that the oldest always sets the example. He's humble. He's religious. He was a youth leader as a young man. Hardworking, best storyteller. True or not, she says. And another interesting thing, you were always willing to take your little sisters out on your dates. Did a lot of things for your parents. Grew up old-fashioned. Sunday is always a family day. Patrick always knew what to do. Patrick born during the war years and made the best of that. From your friend. He said, I actually encouraged Patrick to come to the United States. So to Paul, we really need to give him thanks for getting you here in the first place. Talks about the jobs that y'all had. Patrick Sim was a dishwasher. It's hard to believe that. And then he tells this wonderful story about you were assigned the job to learn to cook the rice.
Indeed.
And it didn't always turn out exactly like it was supposed
to. Be a pot of charcoal.
The bottom. Then talks about your education and how proud he is of you. It was I had a long conversation with Shumei. And Shumei truly is a wonderful lady who talks about that very fondly, of that first day in the foreign students office in Missouri, and this young man comes in, and the first thing you know, well, he's asking her out, and then that begin the relationship that's really been amazing. And she was always impressed that you were willing to move to Chicago even before you had a job. And it's obvious that both of you have had busy lives. She says my husband is a good boy, and he's devoted to our family, and he's a good businessman. He takes good care of us. Let's talk a little bit about your two boys, the pride of your family, obviously. First, tell us about Gabriel.
Well, first of all, I think we should, as parents, you are parents, and lots of the viewers are parents. You know that the parents' hearts are always with the children, and you devote all of everything to them, and you don't you really have no reservation in bringing them up, but how they turn out to be is probably themselves. We can say it's a partly luck, partly environmental influence, and you're, as much as I was influenced by my father, I think it's just perhaps by my behavior, my example, that influenced my children. Gabriel was the smarter. Well, I would not say that because that would offend my younger son. But Gabriel is more savvy in terms of taking care of himself, in terms of goals, in terms of working towards what he wanted. And actually, he was like an ordinary teenager growing up and into college without knowing what he wanted, only knowing that he liked biology, would do well in biology. That's how he liked it. And then only when he was a sophomore in college, beginning to think of a professional career, that he met his dental school mentors, saying that, well, this is a good way. Actually, he was very close to going to pharmacy, as Mom said that, well, with biology background, probably the best way is to become a pharmacist. And he dutifully applied for a pharmacy school at the same time as dental school, and got accepted in both. He said, well, Mom, I do not want to count pills at the counter all my life. So he chose dentistry. And for that, he worked hard enough to become a specialist in endodontics. We're very proud of him.
Well, you have every reason to, and obviously he's proud of you, as we'll see in a minute. But tell us what happened at your birthday last year.
Oh, that's a bit overwhelming and a bit embarrassing. Gabriel, again, of course, I have to say a few words about Claude too. Claude.
Well, let's talk about Gabriel, and also don't forget Joan. She's an integral part of that. And then now I see two pictures back there in the back. Who are those little kids?
Well, they are my grandchildren. Hannah is 3 and Alton is 2. They are actually the joy of our life, very much, and that goes back to Gabriel's career. And while actually after dental school, he, instead of, if you have a father who had all the connections in the world, then probably you would be joining a very good practice, but he did not have. And all deep down in my heart, I would want to see one of my boys at least would go to a field that is close to anesthesia. I think Gabriel went closest to my heart, that he became associated with pain management in dentistry. And he was not satisfied with having a DDS degree. He went to Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, for 2 years training in hospital dentistry, and then saw that there's a field that nobody else would like it because it was too boring in endodontics, root canal. And he spent 2 years there, and while as a junior instructor in one of his classes, he met a young lady, a very sweet, pretty young lady by the name of Joan Wang. Also, they met there, and if you hear their story, I heard it firsthand from Joan's mother. Joan almost did not want to stay in Michigan because she was a native of Michigan. She almost came to Chicago to go to the dental school at Northwestern University, but at last moment she decided to stay in Michigan. That's where she met Gabe. And about that birthday, it was very, very special indeed. It's very memorable. I think it was because Dad is senior enough that he wanted to do something special. Gabe knew that that Dad was driving a very old car, and both he and John conspired, went out to look for a similar car that would be good enough. And I didn't know, I had no knowledge of anything, and all of a sudden it was an evening that I had some friends at home. He just presented me with a huge box, a present there. As a Dad, and this is our present from John and I. And he said, just make a guess what it is. And I shook it. It was just a little thing there, and I opened it. It was a shoebox. And opened another layer. It was a glass. It was a spectacle case. And opened it. It was a key to a new Lexus. They were very thoughtful, and they went drove all the way in Chicagoland to find a similar car similar to my good old faithful
Camry?
Toyota Camry, 93 Camry, and I'm very pleased. I'm very proud of them.
Pretty neat, wasn't that? Wasn't that pretty
generous,
neat?
yes.
Now Patrick drives a fancy Lexus, and
Yes.
Now let's talk about Claude. I'm intrigued with Claude and his venture down the road.
Yes. Claude has a little background of Shumei's family. Shumei came from a musician family. Shumei's grandfather was a pioneer musician. We're talking about musician to the truest sense, collecting folk music in the island of Taiwan before the Japanese war. Would go to the mountains, to the monastery, and everywhere to collect folk tunes and write music, and then perform. He was an educator in music, and then this tradition passed on to Shumei's father's generation. And interestingly, Shumei's father was a classical pianist, very well respected, very well known pedagogist in piano, almost nationally known on the faculty of the National Normal University. And then in Shumei's generation, Shumei has a music degree, but she never practiced music. And it was Claude, the fifth generation of the Chang family, that blossomed in music with his own genes. He had perfect pitch, and he was in two musical instruments since he was 3, piano and violin, and he would also play viola and jazz guitar and any type, and he's been like that all his life, and it's harder to harness a musician artist when he was young. And when he was about second year in high school, a sophomore, he said, "Mom and Dad, music is my career." So with that, his focus was on performing violinist. So he went to Oberlin Conservatory, and when he was a sophomore, he went for audition and was the last two to get a job, but he did not get it because he was too young. And then by the time even before he graduated, he auditioned for a position in Colorado and in Denver, Colorado Symphony Orchestra, and he auditioned for a position job that's associate concertmaster, and he won it. He's negotiated his own contract, and this is his 5th season as a classical musician.
Let me just read you a little bit about what these boys say about their father. blessed and fortunate to have him as my father. Now, as a new father, I see that he had patience with children. They enjoyed being a family, and he never remembers that his father ever lost his temper. Knew how to appease and change direction rather than confront. A very diligent worker. Count on like clockwork. Loves what he does. Prolific reader for pleasure. Knowledgeable about history of both of anesthesia and now of dentistry. Says he puts me to shame. When the boys were teenagers in high school, Patrick often worried about him. He said it was obvious that he did, but he always gave them a leash to do the things that they wanted to try to do. They knew right from wrong, but he gave them responsibility and also freedom. He says, by the way, he's a good cook. Still now doesn't burn the rice. Love and respect is abundant in the Sim house. Unique person. More emotions than most fathers, a real person. My father's always been my hero, the most inspiring person I've ever met in my 26 years. It is not uncommon for me to hear, your dad is the greatest, or your dad is the nicest guy. In fact, I can't remember when my friends or acquaintances haven't gone out of their way to praise him after meeting him. He likes to point out that we should always appreciate the blessings we have in life. And he always goes that extra mile. When I lost my sheet music once before a violin competition, my dad would hurry to the nearest copy center to express mail me a copy. Then I'd get a very light scolding about not forgetting important things. I don't forget things like sheet music anymore. It's impossible to be nurtured in the arts without the complete support of your parents. From driving me to every single piano and violin lesson to traveling to Italy and France with me when I was too young to travel alone, my father's always been my guiding light and my inspiration. Because of him, I know what being a father means. He always demonstrates by example the importance of hard work, integrity, and kindness. He's a firm believer in treating all people with respect, no matter what the card has dealt them. He has the utmost respect for his colleagues and absolutely adores his job as the librarian at the ASA. He takes great pride and is proud of all of us. And he's raised two children that think the world of him. To sum it up, my dad is my favorite person. He's also my best friend, is the kindest and most sincere man, but also is the strongest. My dad doesn't ever give up in spite of the most difficult times. It's been the greatest honor to be born and raised by my father. We could go on for some time. It's been a fun time to talk about that fellow named Patrick Sim. And the members of the ASA may never know the extent of your contribution, Patrick, but I do. Your friendship is one of my most cherished possessions, and I only hope that retirement is not in your vocabulary. But thanks a million for sharing your accomplishments with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Andy, but I want to add that all is said about me probably has nothing to do with my career. But I think
it has everything to do.
I was asked, I was, praised for what I have done for an institution that I love. But I reciprocated by saying that without the institution, without the people who tended the institution, who were leaders of the institution, I would not be doing what I've been doing. I owe ASA and every one of you what I have today. I really appreciate it, Dr. Tandy.
Yeah.
And thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think this is it's great.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is not about me. I mean, about my career. It's about, I just can't realize that you dig up so much. All my friends, my brothers and sisters, I can tell every single description of me. Bill Marenko was really a great mentor and a great boss, so to speak. He taught me a lot.
Absolutely.
He continues to, again, teaching by example. Mm-hmm. And I wish I would be able to do the same thing for my junior colleagues in order to make them enjoy what I have enjoyed.
Well, I think they do. I think they do. It's been a great day.
I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.